We are going to be able to see what they are doing across the board. And in fact, if they now wanted to initiate a covert program that was designed to produce a nuclear weapon, they'd have to completely duplicate. They'd have to create a whole different supply chain. That's point number one.
Back on America's forum, President Obama defending the framework of a nuclear deal with Iran. This as he acknowledged Israel's concerns over the deal. Now, former Congressman Michael Flanagan staying with me and joining me now to go in depth, Ambassador András Simonyi, who's actually joining us from Budapest, Hungary. Wow. So glad that you're with us. Thanks so much. Obviously, the president, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, in front of the camera this weekend, defending their positions. Let's take a listen to what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say.
It's time you can ratchet up the sanctions. Look, biting sanctions were imposed for the first time only in 2012. That got Iran within 18 months to the table. Once you got to the table, instead of ratcheting up the sanctions and the pressures, in fact, you reduced the pressure. And Iran felt no need to make any concessions at all. You have time to insist on a better deal and to ratchet up the pressure. That's the preferable route for all of us.
Prime Minister Netanyahu on 3 of the Sunday talk shows. Obviously, 2 very different takes on the same deal, both the president and the prime minister speaking to a worldwide audience. But you also get the sense that both of them are speaking to members of Congress who will eventually have a very important decision to make. What's your take as far as what their motivation is and what they hope to get across as they are speaking to the media right now to try to sell or also, talk about this deal? Ambassador?
Well, yeah, okay. I do. I was not aware that you were asking me. Okay. Well, first of all, let me say, as you rightly said, it's a framework deal, and since I've been back in Europe the last couple of days, I think there's kind of a sobering. There's a clear understanding we're not there yet, and what happens between now and June is critical. But I'd like to comment on the debate and the clear division between or the huge divide between President Obama and President Netanyahu. I think a key element of making sure that this deal is not going to be one that we will regret is that United States and Israel have to fix their relationship. President Obama and President Netanyahu have to figure out a way to come to terms with each other. This is one thing. But one worry in Europe is really the relationship between the president and Congress. The United States used to be famous for its bipartisanship, and there is a real worry here that this is not just about Iran. This is not just about this deal. There's a general issue of the lack of bipartisanship. So therefore, there's a lot of worry. There are a lot of worries here. Finally, let me say this. I think there are more and more voices saying, look, this is important, but I think Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, was very clear that this is, let's be very cautiously optimistic. The same for the French foreign minister, who said, look, this is great, but we're hardly there yet. And finally, a personal comment I'd like to make. I think there's a big issue missing in this whole debate. This is the issue of the question of human rights in Iran, which has been as if it had been totally forgotten in a country where they're killing the opponents of the regime, where they're killing openly, hunting down and killing gay people. So there are a lot of issues, outstanding issues out there that I think have been missing in the debate. But the bottom line is we're not there yet.
Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, I'm troubled by one factor involved with this deal that probably is not getting the attention it deserves. The Iranian version of this is 200 and some odd words long. The French translation of that is a few words more. Our version, the U.S. version of the deal, is 1,500 words. And you're a diplomat. You live in the world of words and their meanings, and particularly when committed to paper. I think this is a huge problem. Is there some way that perhaps some arbiter can talk about what this deal actually says from the perspective of both countries?
And Ambassador, we have 20 seconds before the break.
Well, I have not studied the different versions in depth, but if there are discrepancies between the texts, that gives reason for worries. Let's give ourselves time to seriously study if there is a big difference, and then we'll see. I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
All right, let's pick up right from there when we return. Once again, Michael Flanagan and Ambassador András Simonyi right after this break.
The Supreme Leader, I think, is often caricatured here as some sort of, Islamist lunatic, when in fact he's been a pretty straight shooter and has supported reasonable negotiations with the United States, and I think we'll continue to see that.
Continuing my conversation with Ambassador András Simonyi and former Congressman Michael Flanagan on MSNBC, calling the Supreme Leader of Iran a straight shooter. Ambassador, your thoughts?
Well, I think this whole deal hinges on the Supreme Leader, and I am not sure he has made up his mind. And I can see that the whole situation is really depending on the power relationship between the hardliners and the so-called reformers. But I'd like to add a little caution here. Even those I would call reformers are not friends of the West. They want to open up, yes, because they want to see Iran prosper. They want to get out of this economic situation. They want to strengthen. But it's obvious to me that no Iranian wants to give up the regional power status that it's trying to acquire. And so that's why I would say I would be very, very cautious on that.
Mr. Ambassador, you're exactly correct. Iran's local ambitions are not to live quietly with its neighbors, but to be a dominant power, even one engaging hegemony. It actually has aspirations to be an international power and feels it has to join the nuclear club to do it. I think that part of the problem with Iran, our dealings with Iran, is that quietly we've made a deal to permit them to operate back, to involve themselves in its neighbors' work. We will turn a blind eye to it, provided we don't have to provide those troops and work on the ground for it. And Europe kind of shrugs and says that works for us. And to that end, we don't want to do anything to upset that deal. And so giving Iran whatever it wants, provided it comes years down the road, is an easy political solution for the administration now. It is not about the Supreme Leader being reasonable. It's about giving in to Iran's need for hegemony in the neighborhood.
I'd like to let me add to this that I keep thinking about what happened to Russia and the breakup of the Soviet Union and Gorbachev and the way we were euphoric in the early 90s about, okay, this is end of history and everything is, and look where we are now. So we have to be cautious and we need to learn our lessons from the past and see that Iran is playing a long-term game, and we have to be very clear about a deal got to be a deal that holds long-term and upsetting the regional power balance. And this is why I referred to the fact that the U.S. needs to repair its relationship with its allies in the region. First and foremost, Saudi Arabia. It's got to improve its relationship with Israel. And that I think it dovetails with what you have just said.
Ambassador Simonyi joining us right now from Budapest, Hungary. As part of the negotiations, England and France at the table. What is your overall sense right now with how Europe looks at this particular deal? The average citizen, where do you think right now they stand as far as this deal with Iran?
I know it's amazing to see that looking at this whole thing from Europe, there is a lot of euphoria still. There is what I would say the romantics are still dominating. But I think voices of reason can be seen. And as I said, in the last couple of days, a lot of strong statements of caution have been in the European media. I would say that Europe understands that this deal is a deal, basically, whether we like it or not, is a deal between the United States and Iran, period. The Europeans want to see a peaceful settlement of the Iranian problem. The Europeans are, of course, scared and worried of a nuclear Iran. There is a lot more naivete in Europe concerning Iran than there is in the United States. But at the end of the day, this deal depends on the leadership of the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting. The world community came together on this one in particular. You mentioned European leaders and Chinese leaders, but it's, again, the United States and Iran. When we come right back, Michael Flanagan and I will be talking about welfare fraud.